She stood where the grass thinned into dust, separated from the loose curve of the pride by a distance that felt deliberate. The other lions moved slowly, feeding, resting, rising and settling again while she remained still. Her body was upright but heavy, shoulders locked, head lowered just enough that her gaze stayed fixed on the small shape at her feet. From afar it looked like rest, a mother pausing while her cub slept. Only the silence around them suggested otherwise. The cub lay on its side, legs folded at odd angles, ribs barely lifting beneath its spotted coat. Each breath arrived shallow and delayed, as if pulled from somewhere far inside. Flies gathered and lifted again, unsettled by the faint movement of air. The lioness nudged once with her nose, slow and careful, then withdrew, sitting back on her haunches. She did not lie down. She did not leave. Her tail rested along the ground without motion, the tip no longer marking time. Rangers watching from a distance noticed the stillness before they noticed the cub. In a landscape where everything shifted, wind through grass, birds lifting, shadows crawling with the sun, stillness was a signal. The lioness had not joined the pride at dawn. She had not followed when they moved toward shade. She remained planted, eyes tracking every sound, every flicker, while the cub's breathing thinned further, each rise of the chest a fragile effort. The air held a low tension, the kind that comes before a storm that never breaks. Insects buzzed, distant hoofbeats passed and faded, and yet the space around the pair felt sealed off. When the cub's body trembled, barely more than a ripple beneath the skin, the lioness leaned forward again. Her whiskers brushed the cub's face. A quiet sound left her throat, not a call, not a warning, but something low and contained. "It's okay," one ranger murmured under his breath, though the lioness did not react. The cub's eyes opened briefly, unfocused, then closed again. One paw flexed, scraping the dust before falling still. The lioness rose to her feet, towering over the cub, and stood there as if bracing against an unseen force. Her ears tilted back and forward, reading the world for threats that were no longer the danger. She circled once, slowly, careful not to touch, then returned to her original place, standing guard over a body that seemed to be slipping away. Time stretched unevenly. Minutes felt long, then vanished. The pride glanced toward her but did not approach. Instinct held them at a respectful distance. This was not a hunt, not a conflict, but something private and unresolved. The cub's breathing became more irregular, pauses growing longer between each fragile rise. The lioness lowered herself at last, folding her legs beneath her, chest close to the ground, face level with the cub's. Another soft sound escaped her, quieter than before, and then she was still again. The grass shifted as a light wind passed through, bending stalks around them. In the far distance, the pride moved on, their shapes blurring into the heat. The lioness remained, eyes fixed on her cub as the sun edged higher and the day continued, indifferent, bright, and unbearably calm. The hours that followed did not bring relief. The cub's breathing grew thinner, each pause longer than the last, until the spaces between breaths seemed to weigh more than the breaths themselves. The lioness remained close, adjusting her posture again and again, lowering her head to the cub's chest as if listening for something that might return. When the sun climbed higher and the air warmed, she rose and paced in a short line back and forth, stopping only to look down at the hookup of her cub's body in the dust. Something shifted then, subtle but decisive. She lifted her head and looked beyond the grass, beyond the place where the pride had disappeared. Her ears angled toward a sound that did not belong to the plains, a steady metallic rhythm, distant but distinct. She stood for a long moment, weighing nothing that could be seen. Then she lowered her head, gripped the cub gently by the loose skin at the back of its neck, and lifted it. The cub did not resist. Its body hung heavy and unresponsive, legs swaying with each step. The lioness moved slowly at first, pausing often, setting the cub down to rest. Each time she released her grip, she watched for movement, for breath. Each time the cub lay still, chest barely stirring. After the third pause, she did not wait long before lifting the cub again. Her path was not direct. She skirted the edge of the open land, moving through taller grass, avoiding the usual routes. The ground changed beneath her paws, becoming firmer, marked faintly with human tracks. The smell shifted to oil, dust, old metal, foreign and sharp. She stopped, ears flattening, body tensing, and set the cub down once more. The cub's mouth opened slightly, releasing a thin sound that barely carried. The lioness pressed her nose to its side, then looked up again toward the source of the unfamiliar noise. At the edge of the reserve, a lone man worked beside a fence line, focused on a repair that required both hands and attention. He did not see her at first. The lioness stepped into view, stopping just short of the open ground. Her posture was upright, not crouched, not advancing. The cub lay at her feet again, unmoving. She did not bare her teeth. She did not growl. She simply stood, eyes fixed on the man, tail low and still. When the man finally noticed her, he froze. His body stiffened, breath held instinctively. He did not run. He did not raise his voice. He lowered himself slowly to one knee, keeping his hands visible, movements deliberate and calm. "Easy," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. The lioness took one step forward, then stopped. She lowered her head and nudged the cub once, twice, as if drawing attention to what mattered. Her gaze never left the man. The distance between them remained, a fragile line neither crossed. Wind moved through the grass, lifting dust between them, carrying the scent of the cub's weakness outward. The man stayed still, eyes soft, posture low. He did not reach out. He did not move closer. After a long moment, the lioness lay down beside the cub, folding her body around it without covering it, leaving it visible. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes remained open. Nothing in her stance suggested surrender, but there was no threat in it either. Only waiting. Only trust extended far beyond instinct. The sun slid behind a thin veil of cloud, dulling the light, and for a brief moment, the world held its breath with them, suspended between wild distance and quiet, unspoken hope. The distance between them closed by a single step. The lioness rose again, her movements slow and measured, and lifted the cub with the same careful grip she had used all day. She did not rush. Each paw settled deliberately into the dust, shoulders rolling with controlled restraint. When she reached the man, she stopped just beyond arm's length and lowered her head, easing the cub onto the ground in front of him. The cub's body met the earth without resistance, its weight sinking softly into the soil. The man did not move. His breath was shallow, his balance held low and steady, hands resting open against his knees. Fear passed through him in a quiet wave, sharp but contained, overridden by something heavier and more immediate. The cub lay between them, ribs fluttering faintly, a tremor passing through one hind leg before stillness returned. Dust clung to its whiskers. One eye opened briefly, clouded and unfocused, then closed again. The lioness stepped back half a pace and sat. Her posture was upright, composed, her head level with the man's chest. She watched him without blinking, ears angled forward, absorbing every shift of his body, every change in breath. There was no sound from her now. No warning. No plea. Only presence. The air around them felt tightened, drawn inward, as if the land itself were paying attention. The man lowered himself further until he was seated on the ground. He did not reach for the cub. He let the space remain intact, respectful, unchanged. A thin breeze passed through, lifting the cub's fur and carrying its scent toward the lioness. She leaned forward slightly, nostrils flaring, then settled again, eyes never leaving the man's hands. Minutes passed without movement. The cub's breathing faltered, then resumed, shallow but persistent. A small sound escaped its throat, barely audible, more vibration than voice. The lioness's tail tip flicked once, then went still. Her gaze softened, not away from the man, but through him, as if measuring whether this strange stillness might hold. The man spoke once, his voice low and even. "You're safe," he said quietly, the words falling into the space between them without expectation. The lioness did not react to the sound itself, only to the calm it carried. She did not retreat. She did not advance. She remained. Slowly, carefully, the man shifted one hand forward, stopping long before it reached the cub. He paused, waiting. The lioness's ears twitched, then relaxed. Her shoulders lowered a fraction, tension easing just enough to be felt. The man moved again, this time closer, his fingers brushing the dust near the cub's flank. The cub stirred, a weak flex of its paw, a shallow breath drawn in response to the contact. The lioness leaned forward, her nose hovering inches above the cub, breath warm and steady. She did not interfere. She did not touch the man. She watched, absorbing every detail, ready to act if the fragile balance shifted. The man's hand rested near the cub now, not grasping, not lifting, only present, offering warmth and stillness. The sun dipped slightly behind a drifting cloud, softening the light. Shadows stretched thin across the ground, blurring the hard edges of the fence line. Somewhere beyond them, insects resumed their rhythm, and a distant bird call passed through the air. Between the man and the lioness, nothing changed, and yet everything had. They remained there together, bound not by trust alone, but by the quiet agreement to move no faster than the cub could breathe. The change came quietly, without announcement. It began as warmth returning beneath the man's fingertips, a subtle shift in the cub's body that could easily have been missed. The skin along its flank no longer felt cool and unresponsive. There was resistance now, faint but present, a sign that something inside was still working to stay. The man adjusted his posture, careful not to loom, careful not to hurry, keeping his movements slow enough to remain readable to the lioness watching from only a few steps away. The cub's breathing steadied, no longer breaking into long, frightening pauses. Each rise of its chest remained shallow, but the rhythm grew more consistent, like a thread being rewoven. One ear twitched, reacting to the brush of air, and a small muscle along its shoulder flexed. The movement was slight, incomplete, but unmistakably alive. The man did not touch again right away. He waited, letting the cub settle into its own effort. The lioness lowered herself to the ground beside them, close enough that her flank nearly touched the cub's back. Her body formed a barrier without closing the space completely. She rested her head on the earth, chin pressed into the dust, eyes level with the cub's. Her breathing slowed to a deep, even cadence, the sound low and steady. When the cub shifted again, dragging one paw weakly toward her, she did not intervene. She watched, allowing the effort to complete itself. A soft sound escaped the cub's throat, thin and uneven, barely rising above the hum of insects. It was not a call, not a cry, but it carried intention. The lioness lifted her head immediately, nostrils flaring as she leaned in close. She brushed her nose along the cub's face, lingering there, then withdrew just enough to watch its response. The cub's eyes opened, unfocused but present, and remained open longer than before. The man moved then, slow and deliberate, sliding a folded cloth beneath the cub's chest to lift it slightly, improving its posture without separating it from the ground. He paused halfway through the motion, checking the lioness's reaction. She did not rise. She did not bare her teeth. Her eyes followed his hands closely, but her body remained relaxed, weight settled, tail lying still behind her. The balance held. The cub responded to the adjustment with another small movement, a deeper breath drawn in, ribs expanding more fully this time. Heat gathered beneath its skin, the faint chill receding. Its paw flexed again, toes spreading, then resting against the earth. The man withdrew his hands and sat back, allowing the cub to remain undisturbed, letting the moment belong to the animal and its mother. The lioness leaned closer and began to groom the cub, her tongue moving slowly, deliberately, each stroke brief and controlled. She avoided the cub's head at first, focusing on its side, its back, grounding it through touch. The cub did not resist. It settled into the contact, breathing evening out as the repetitive motion continued. The sound of grooming filled the quiet space, steady and rhythmic. The man spoke once, softly, without urgency. "That's it," he said, the words carried on the same calm that shaped his movements. The lioness did not look at him, but she did not stop. She continued to groom, pausing only when the cub shifted closer to her body, pressing weakly into her warmth. The light began to change as the sun lowered, softening the edges of the land around them. Shadows lengthened, cooling the ground, and the air lost its sharpness. The cub's breathing remained steady now, its small body rising and falling against the lioness's chest. She lifted her head and looked out across the grass, alert again but without the earlier tension. The moment did not resolve itself into certainty. Nothing was guaranteed. But as the breeze moved through the grass and the cub remained awake, warm and breathing, the space around them felt lighter. Hope did not arrive loudly. It settled in gently, carried on the sound of a cub breathing evenly beneath a watchful mother, as the day eased toward evening. Dusk arrived slowly, the heat loosening its grip as light thinned across the grass. The lioness rose without urgency, her movements unhurried, as if the day had finally allowed her to continue. She nudged the cub once, gently, testing its response. The cub shifted, clumsy but present, drawing its legs closer beneath its body. Its breathing remained steady, shallow but reliable, warmed now by the nearness of its mother. The man stayed where he was, seated on the ground, posture low, hands resting open in his lap. He did not follow the lioness with his eyes when she stepped forward. He kept his gaze soft, unfixed, allowing the space to remain hers. The cub let out a faint sound as the lioness lowered her head and took hold of the loose skin at the back of its neck. This time, there was tension in the cub's body, a weak but willing response, its limbs tucking instinctively as it was lifted. She turned away from him and took several slow steps toward the tall grass. The cub hung against her chest, no longer limp, its head resting against her shoulder. After a few paces, the lioness stopped. She stood still, framed against the darkening land, her silhouette strong and unmistakable. For a moment she looked back. Her gaze settled on the man, steady and unreadable. There was no warning in it, no gratitude that could be named, only recognition. The man did not move. He did not nod or speak. He held the stillness as carefully as he had held every moment before. "Go on," he said quietly, the words barely carried by the air. The lioness turned again and disappeared into the grass, her shape dissolving as the stems closed behind her. The sound of her movement faded quickly, absorbed by the land. The cub's small body vanished with her, taken back into the rhythm of the wild. The space they left behind felt suddenly larger, emptier, yet charged with something that lingered. The man remained where he was for a long time. The fence line stretched beside him, unchanged, ordinary. Insects gathered in the cooling air, their quiet chorus rising as light slipped further away. The sky deepened, layers of color settling into blue and gray. Somewhere beyond sight, the pride would be regrouping, the lioness returning with her cub, carrying it back into the safety of familiarity and danger intertwined. He stood at last, brushing dust from his clothes, movements slow and thoughtful. There was nothing to collect, nothing to mark the place. No sign remained that the boundary between wild and human had thinned so completely. And yet the weight of it stayed with him, pressing gently but firmly against his chest. As he turned back toward his work, the grass shifted once more in the distance, moved by wind alone. The last light caught the tops of the stalks, turning them briefly gold before the color drained away. The land settled into evening, calm and indifferent, holding the memory without comment, as the night moved in and the quiet closed around everything that had passed.